So, Cammy, are you ready to hear a little bit about Jesus' life?
Yeah, Grandpa, what did he even do? Did he have friends? Did he have a job? Why didn't anyone help him when he was on the cross? Did he always know he was going to go up to heaven, or did he just find out at the very last second?
Well, let's see what we can find out. Remember the last time I told you the story? It was about epic hope. Well, today's story is about peace.
Peace?
Perfect peace.
Perfect peace.
They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed.
Well, good morning. That was peaceful. The nervous laughter. If you're picking up on like Princess Bride vibes with the buffer here, this would be the part of that movie, if you know that movie, where the ROUS, the rodents of unusual size, kind of come out. Well, here we go. See what happens. So what comes to mind for you when you hear the words perfect peace? What's the image that comes to your mind? I think there's an image here that we have going on, and I want to show it to you here. Right there it is. Is this the image, this perfectly still lake? Nothing on the surface is moving. The wind is calm. The air is warm. And often I think when we think of peace, this is what we think of. Maybe, we're entering into the season of winter, so maybe it's the image of nice, softly falling snowflakes in a calm, while you're sitting by a fire and things are calm and peaceful. But let me show you another more personal image. This one's from the summer, so you may be a little, here it is. This is actually a picture of my 3 boys, and again, they're standing by, the peaceful, still, calm lake. And I don't know about your household, but my experience of being a parent of 3 young boys, this is a deceiving picture. Very deceiving. So much so, let's go to the next one. This one is only taken moments before And there we have my middle child, Kyle, who is being shoved into the river and by my oldest, and my youngest child is not sure. Is he stabbing him? It is unclear. What is fun, I did ask for permission to share these photos of my kids, and Kyle's response, who's the one that's getting shoved into the river here, he says, "Did I get pushed into the rapids by Tim and then stabbed by Sean? And also, my hair, gorgeous." He still longs for those days. It is true. It is true. But what I want to present to you, the reason why I'm giving you these images and we're talking about this, is I want to kind of highlight for you two ideas. The first is that there are times and situations that at first glance seem to be still and calm and peaceful, perfectly peaceful, but they are not. There is much turmoil going on underneath that, and we see this in this story. And the second thing that I want to highlight for us today is that the act of peace, and we're in the season of Advent where we're going through the themes of hope, peace, joy, and love, and I want to propose that the act of peace, when it actually is brought forth, has a profound and forever effect on all that is around it. And I find that this comes and is captured beautifully by the singer-songwriter Bruce Cockburn. And he has a song called "Cry of a Tiny Babe," and the chorus goes like this: "Like the stone on the surface of a still river, driving the ripples on forever, redemption rips through the surface of time in the cry of a tiny babe." Hold this image. We're going to come back to this again at the very end. What we're going to do now is I'm going to walk us through the text. We're going to make some observations and look at some of the strange things that we find ourselves in this text. So let me read, and then I'll just walk us through. So we're going to start here at Mark 5, verse 1. "They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes, and when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with the chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones." Let's pause here, and the first thing I want us to ask is, who's the they in the start of this story? And perhaps you have been to church before and you are very quickly going, well, the they must be the disciples and Jesus. And I want to say, yes, it is the disciples and Jesus. Just prior to this story in the Gospel of Mark, we find in chapter 4 is actually the very moment when Jesus calms a huge storm on a lake. And the disciples are there trying to figure out how are we going to handle this huge storm. Jesus wakes up and he says what? He says, "Peace, be still." And the end of that story is that the disciples are afraid. Who is this? Where did they land in this story? Well, they landed on the southeast side of the Lake of Galilee. And this is a known area to be that of mostly non-Jewish people. We're going to make some more observations as we walk through this text, so pay attention. And the other thing I want us to pay attention to, which is pretty obvious in this story, is that they have found themselves in among the tombs, a graveyard. And this is no place for a Jewish rabbi to be, in non-Jewish territory, in and among the tombs. Jesus finds himself here, and everything seems to be going, no, this should not be the place. And then we have this man run out, yelling and approaching Jesus. So we go on. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus said to him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again to not send him out of this area. What do you make of the line from the demon that says, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" One of the central themes in the whole Gospel of Mark is the question, who is Jesus? In chapter 1 of this Gospel, Jesus encounters another unclean spirit and immediately identifies Jesus as the Holy One of God. And Jesus quickly shushes them. In chapter 2, when we hear about the healing of the paralytic, the question is, who is it that can forgive sins that the Pharisees ask in this moment? And we get it here again in chapter 4, what we just kind of referenced when we heard about the storm that was going on, and the disciples are confronted with this amazing act of Jesus to calm the storm, and they say, who is this that can calm the storm? And in fact, Peter doesn't even get it until chapter 8, when there's an interchange between the disciples and Jesus is asking them, who do you say I am? And it is only in that moment that Peter says, you are the Messiah. So it is strange in this context. We're finding that throughout the story, the first half of the Gospel of Mark here, the demons are getting it. They're understanding who Jesus is, but no one else seems to be getting it. Let's move on. Oh, sorry. One more thing I wanted to say before we move on. Legion. Did you catch that? Yeah, you did? What do you know about Legion? What have we heard of before? So we know that Legion is a nod towards the Roman fighting force, a weapon of mass destruction, if you will. It is comprised of 5,400 to 6,000 troops. Enormous. And when Legion would come upon your country, you would shudder in fear. Now let's move on. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them. He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out of him and went into the pigs. The herd was about 2,000 in number, and they rushed down the steeps of the bank and into the lake and were drowned. If you didn't know that you were in non-Jewish territory, you certainly do now. We have a large herd of pigs. Very simple, a good observation, Scott. And Jesus grants permission to this demon to be drowned in the sea. And I want just to pause just for a moment here and ask you the question, can you think of another story in the history of Israel that has a moment of when a large group is drowned in the sea? Can you think of that moment? When Israel is fleeing Egypt, the Pharaoh and Egypt, the Pharaoh army, they come across the Red Sea, and the sea swallows the army, and they are drowned in the sea. Keep this in mind. Let's continue. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this into the town and the countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. And they came to Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by legion of demons sitting there dressed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs. And then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave the region. Here we have a huge impact in this moment on the economic scenario that they find themselves in. There's huge loss, and this crowd is getting nervous. And notice again, we see this repeated picture that we heard just in the chapter previous, where there is this man who has been made right in his own mind, and everyone else beside is afraid. Jesus has calmed, just like Jesus calmed the lake, Jesus has calmed this person, and those around are not understanding of what is going on. Verses 18 to 20. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him, and Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has mercy on you." And so the man went away and began to tell tell the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. We've already discussed that this story is a departure of Jesus Jesus is doing some amazing work here. And he is now met with a man who wants to come to him after this amazing healing and does something that is which is usually a departure in the Gospel of Mark. He actually encourages this man to go and tell others. Everywhere else in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus says, shh, quiet. And this is a foreshadowing of what is to come. I want us now to pause a little bit. We've kind of read through this story again. We've made some observations. And now what I want to do is actually allow this story to read us. So I'm not sure who you resonate or who you relate to most in this story, but I'm going to give you 5 options. And here they are. Do you resonate with the disciples? Afraid and still in the boat? Because that's how the story reads. It looks like they don't even get out of the boat. They're so confused of what is going on. Still so afraid that they can't get out of the boat, and yet you witness another earth-shattering event that blows your mind and the cultural and religious sensibilities that you have. Do you identify with the possessed, tortured man who is overwhelmed, alone, isolated, and without hope? This person who is pushed away from his community to be and live among the dead. Do you resonate or do you identify with the pig farmers? Perhaps you are feeling today that you feel like you are an outsider, someone who has seen amazing things, and these amazing things have turned your world upside down, and you're not sure what you think about it. In fact, you might even be a little angry in the midst of your awestruckness. Do you identify or do you resonate with the post-depossessed man, feeling whole and good, but told to go to a place that is hostile? And finally, do you resonate and feel like you are most like Jesus in this story? Someone who is on mission, deeply connected to God in the midst of storms and hostile territory. Do you sense this deep connectedness and sense that God's power and joy and peace in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the challenge and the hostileness? Where do you resonate this morning? I'm going to walk through these different pieces, and I'm going to offer just very briefly a suggested practice of peace for you this week. So, if you feel like you are the disciples, afraid and still in the boat, my invitation to you, and we read it in the gospel, is stay close to Jesus. So read the Gospels this week. If you feel like you're the disciple, you're close to Jesus, but you're not quite getting it, the invitation is to read more of the Gospels. Get close to Jesus. This is the place by which you will journey with God and come to understand and know who He is, even though if you're like Peter, you don't get it until chapter 8. And even then, partially. If you find yourself this morning in a place where you are overwhelmed, alone, isolated, and with hope, I want to remind you of the prayer practices that Joel Jolly actually invited us to pray only a few weeks ago. He invited us to practice that of Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy. This is a prayer practice that I would specifically invite you into. In addition to that, my invitation to you is to ask the question, Jesus, where are you in this moment? It's an act, it's a practice of listening prayer. Pause, listen, ask the question. And my invitation to you, if this is where you're feeling this morning, is come and reach out to those around you. At the end of the service, we have people ready here to pray for you. My invitation is for you to come and be prayed for. Perhaps you feel like you are one of the pig farmers. You're on the outside, and you're not sure what you really think about this whole Jesus thing, and in fact, you think it might have destroyed your economical life. My invitation to you is, well, I'm curious as to why you're here, but if you are here, my invitation to you is that. Be curious. Get close to a person's story. So sidle up to someone who you have seen before and has talked about how Jesus has transformed their life, and be curious about their story. Ask questions. If you're the post-depossessed man, feeling whole and good, but told to go, your invitation this morning is to obey, is to go. In the midst of the questions you may have, not knowing what it will look like to go to this place that is home, be reconnected to your community, and to tell your story. And this morning, if you resonate and you sense that you are resonating with who Jesus is this morning, awesome. And my invitation to you is, again, if you read the Gospel of Mark, one of the things that Jesus does frequently is he finds a way to go into the wilderness, to be still and quiet and pray. So that's my invitation to you, your practice of peace this week, is if you are feeling deeply connected to God, there's places where you need to go and find where you are resting in silence and solitude with God. All right. Yeah. What about Legion and the drowned pigs? Kind of just left those out. I was hoping we're going to bring it back up. I want us to talk a little bit about this. In previous teachings, we have heard a little bit how the very first line of the Gospel of Mark begins with that. This is the Gospel of Mark, which means the evangelion this is the good news. And this was a practice by the Roman Empire to announce and proclaim the good news that you are occupied. You have now been overtaken. It's so good that we're here and have completely taken over your property and your lands and who you are. And this statement of power is noted here. And I would say that in this story, we find that Mark, the writer of Mark, embeds in the story a bold, seditious claim that Jesus and his kingdom has power over the practices of violence and oppression under Rome and of Pharaoh and his armies. This story is not just about Jesus coming to a town to heal and free a person from their pain and torturedness. This is a story about the work of God coming to earth to defeat evil and to defeat the systems and powers of violence and oppression. And let's kind of come back full circle to Bruce Coburn's quote here. Like the stone on the surface of a still river, driving the ripples on forever, redemption rips through the surface of time in the cry of a tiny babe. As Bruce writes here, that the cry of a tiny babe is the small thing that kind of rips through time, the time-space continuum. Jesus' ministry that we're observing here is like this massive boulder that gets pushed off from the cliff. And there's something that just goes out from there, crashing down, knowing that the systems of oppression and violence are being dealt with. And you might make the leap in your mind, as we are about to head into communion, that Jesus' death and resurrection is the irreversible cataclysmic event to change everything.
So, Cami, what did you think?
That's so many pigs.
You are right about that.
This story wasn't very peaceful, Grandpa.
Not very peaceful for the pigs, but what about the man?
Oh yeah, Jesus made him feel all better. He really wasn't feeling good.
He really wasn't.
Like when I get my bad tummy aches. Wait, so you're saying Jesus can take away my bad tummy aches?
Yes, Jesus did a lot of miracles, just like the one I told you about.
Like what?
Well, the one time he fed 5,000 people with only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He made a blind man see, and he raised a little girl from the dead.
What?
Yeah, and one time he walked on water.
How is that even possible?
With Jesus makes all things possible, so just like the man in the story, we get to experience his peace.
Perfect peace.
Well, it's getting late.
But Grandpa, what happened before that?
Okay, so thank you for sharing this morning. Thank you for sharing. There was so much engagement even in the text messages here. You asked what resonates with you, and you shared a few stages, and I know, and people kind of opened their hearts. Lots of heavy things, lots of fear, lots of uncertainty. People have a desire for that peace that you were sharing about. One person shared that their father has had multiple surgeries over in a short space of time, and was told that he has a short time to live, but he's still alive, and there's questions there. And another person says, let me read it out. Our church isn't doing enough about the work of peace in this culture of genocidal complacency. Feels inappropriate to me to practice peace in this context, but I know I should. Can you say anything to help? And as well as I think what I can extend as well, the next question is, what are some practical ways to experience peace?
I think my first thing that I want to say in response to this is often I started with this with the talk, which is often when we hear peace, we think of it as an experience, something that I have, something that I can hold, something that, is this picturesque kind of moment. And all I know is I don't have a lot of those moments in my life, and so I just want more of those. And I think my invitation to us is to actually try to flip that a little bit on its head, or at least think of it a little differently, or maybe it's an ad, which is think of peace as something you practice. So we're kind of getting into it a little bit in terms of the questions here. But what are the components of peace that you need to participate in? And sometimes that's going to look like taking time to reflect and to remember how God has intervened through not just your story, but through the story of the church and through the story that we read through the story of the Gospels and the Bible. So to pause and reflect. Sometimes it's going to mean to act. So I do appreciate the allusion to places where, how is it that I can practice peace when I live in a world where I see evil participating in a grand way, well, not just a grand way, but in very practical ways. And I can't sugarcoat that. That is happening. And the story of Jesus is to come and to vanquish that oppressive violence. That is God's heart. That is God's desire. That is how God wants us to participate in as we live and enact his kingdom. So I do think that probably means, for some of us, that means to take a serious look on how we are in the system and participating in these acts of violence. And we'll have to take stock. We'll have to ask for repentance and actually make some changes. That's a short response and grossly inadequate. But let's keep going. Ask another one.
Yeah, thank you. Next question, there seems to be a curiosity around the pigs, the demons, and that type of stuff. And so one question is, why did Jesus give mercy to the demons at the expense of the pig farmers and their livelihood? And another question is, where did the demons go like after the pigs went off a cliff?
Yeah, I'm just not going to answer those questions. So this is how I'm going to answer that. This is how I'm going to respond to it. The story of the prodigal son. You know that story? You're familiar? That's kind of one of the more kind of classic kind of, everyone knows that one. And we know it by the story of the prodigal son. What is the story about? The story isn't really about the son at all. The story is about the extravagant love of the father who picks up his robe and runs to the prodigal son. It's not about the son, it's about the father. Similarly, in this story, we get kind of tripped up in our Western sensibilities around where did this go? How did that happen? How many or how many angels can sit on a pin of a needle? And what I want to say here is the story that we are reading and experiencing this morning is that Jesus, the Son of the Most High God, is the King, above the emperor, and is the one that is going to unseat and put and deal with the oppression of Legion and the Pharaoh. That's what the story is about. So, didn't answer it, and I get a little excited when I kind of focus in what I think is really what the story is about. There you go.
Okay, the last one is, what is your take on the relationship between evil spirits and mental illness?
I knew this question was going to come. You just
sorry. I'm the messenger.
Are you sorry?
Just the messenger.
You're just the messenger. Are you sorry? So, I believe that evil is present, and Jesus deals with evil. And so I don't know is the short answer, what is the exact relationship, but I do know that God has created us to be people with creativity and tenderness and empathy, and so that I also want to say that God has created us to be whole beings, not just thinkers, but actually we are whole beings as thinkers. We are people of spirit and body, and those things are interwoven together, and they do interact with each other. And my invitation is, how do we deal with this? Is we have to go at it from all angles. And so if you're at a place where you feel like you need to be prayed for, and then come and be prayed for, and let's go to places and get help from wherever we can get it, so that we can bring about healing, because that is part of what Jesus is asking us to do.
Thank you so much, Scott. Please close us off.
Many of you know that I commute every morning to my office, usually on my bicycle, and I have practiced this sermon many times in my head on that commute. And as you even observed in this very short moment of Q&R, this story actually does really quite resonate with me. I find it quite moving, and I find it quite profound. And so I want to leave with you, wherever you find yourself with this story, whoever you resonate with in this story, remind yourself this week that Jesus is coming to be present to you and to bring about the reconciliation of the whole earth. This is the message of peace. And so may it be so. May the peace of Christ be upon you, upon your family, and upon this world, we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen. Go.